the bewitching hour, so we'll call the meeting to order. And if you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And is our tradition, I would like to ask if any member of council has a conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest with any of the items on the agenda today.
I do not.
No.
Okay, thank you all. Next we want to deal with a couple of items concerning the agenda for today. I will start with a couple of notes. First of all, under old business, item A is an audio system update and demonstration. We're going to go ahead and move that up to the first item after this draft agenda part. Our consultant is here, and rather than having him sit through a lengthy part of the meeting, he will demonstrate a couple of alternative microphone systems that we might use that would make sound better, especially for those who are watching on YouTube. So that will come immediately after the draft agenda section. And the other item for me is we will be adding a presentation after Robert Neal's dredging project update that will be given by Neil Gilbert and Tom Goodwin on some of the seismic testing legislation that has been given a go-ahead in the last week. Council members, are there any other comments regarding the today's agenda?
I do not, Mr. Mayor.
No. No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if any of you have watched council meetings on YouTube, you may or may not have noticed that sometimes council members are not always easily heard by our current microphone system. And we're trying to address that, and we're doing so by asking our consultant if there are alternative microphones that might make it easier for council members to look in either direction, sitting in the middle of the table, something I'm always doing, and yet still be picked up on the microphone. So if we can go ahead with that. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good? We good? Okay. So basically what we have right now is, due to the layout of this room and due to the way the speakers are, we have facing towards the audience and facing towards y'all. Whenever you turn your head, depending on what the gain is, since there's nobody there actively monitoring the switchboard that can adjust the gain, you know, so when you do turn your head, it doesn't fade out. The options that we can usually go with is a microphone like the one I have on right now. It's fixed to the head. It's supposed to be beige. It's supposed to hide. It's just something where you can just keep turning around and present to other people. Your other options would be, say, a lavalier mic, something that would clip on to you right here. I know that some of you are already used to that, and some people don't like them due to putting them on, taking them off. Or your third option, which would be, sounds the best but looks the worst, would be a full headset microphone, which would be something like this one right here, something where you can actually have the mic. That way with this, you can forget that you're speaking into a mic. With this type, the microphone's not as close to your mouth, so once you get it dialed in, it'll be fine. But something like this, you can actively, sorry, I got a bundle of the stuff. You know, you're actively moving it around and adjusting where you can actually make sure you sound right. But as far as the system that you have right now, those are the big three that you can use. I know at one point in time it was mentioned maybe trying to get like an omnidirectional microphone or something. The problem you run into that is if it's picking up in all directions, there's no way to dial in the gain. You will just get constant reverberation and feedback, and you know, it'll just go into a loop. So if this was like a podcast where people were sitting with headphones on and there wasn't no speakers and everything, then you could go for you could have a more sensitive microphone that you could dial up, and you know, where you could turn your head. But even in those situations, I guess the downside of a mic is that you have to speak directly into it. Yeah. So those are the like the big options with the current system that you have right now.
We have an option where if we have a council person that has hard of hearing, would it help? Do we have something for that?
Yes, there's for a council person, because
Right.
I know for the current system set up, if there's somebody in the audience that's hard of hearing, there's headphones and everything they can put on. As far as the council person, no, but that could be expanded out to where there could be wireless headphones for whoever needs it. Headphones is usually a great way to know if you're being heard, because you can actively hear yourself.
Is there possibility of getting the tablet that records what's being said so that it can be read and not have to have something in your ears?
Like they do on telephones. You know, you call in and you can read what the person's saying.
Right.
I think
I see no reason why not a text-to-speech option couldn't be configured. The way the system is right now, I don't see any reason why that couldn't be configured. You'd probably have to run it either through another computer or just something that has, you know, like Dragon Naturally Speaking or some other speech-to-text type of software.
without too much discussion, I'm the one there, I think, indirectly, they're trying to help. I'm mostly deaf, believe it or not. I have two kinds of hearing problems, and they're permanent. One is discrimination, and the other is just basically hearing. It's in the family, so it is what it is. If we have the one that, I think the first one that you mentioned with the,
This one right here?
well, the other one, the one in black,
Okay.
is there any way that we could, if it's connected to the system, try it to see how it works for a week, to see what the feedback is from YouTube and other?
Like I say, I currently have a system right here that y'all could try out that's
Yeah,
configured
because
into it.
we had the other one that has the, you pin on your shirt, and sometimes that didn't work too well. And before, some of the council members didn't want to have anything around or close to their mouth, or what have you. I'm not the only one that's deaf in this room, I'm sure. Most people have hearing aids and those kinds of things, and most people don't know that they're deaf. And also, most people are not going to admit that they're losing their hearing, other than their wife when they have to lower the television. So I'm game for anything that works, not for me personally, but for the audience and the people on YouTube.
Okay.
You know, like our church has something, the microphone, so when the minister is speaking, it goes through that headphone.
He probably has like a monitoring setup, but are you talking about where he can actually hear himself speak?
No, the audience can hear him speak. Like
Okay.
Richard, if someone asked Richard a question, he'd be able to hear it. He'd also be able to hear what we're saying right now better than he does right now. We'd just like to be able to enhance his ability to listen better.
Okay, yeah, like I say, I don't see any reason why that couldn't be incorporated into the system. Like I say, we have something already similar with the wireless headphones and everything. So, yeah, that's something that I can look into for y'all.
And the only problem I have with the ones so close to your mouth, you know, we're not the only ones that use these mics. So there's other people.
Well, the
Planning board, they don't use them?
the gain can, like I said, y'all don't have, you don't have anybody that is monitoring the soundboard to where, like, there's each one of y'all speak at different tones at different distances from the microphone. If there was somebody at the soundboard, then they could do the minor adjustments depending on who's talking and how close they are. I guess an example would be, let's just say I am just somebody that's here to speak one time. I might be one of those people that talk way back here, or I might be somebody that talks like, you know, like this. If you had somebody at the board, they could do active adjustments to the gain. Because like it's always a give or take. You want to have the microphone pick up as much as possible without getting feedback from the system that is currently in here. So some adjustments could be made during the course of a meeting to where, depending on how you handle the microphone, how the gain is adjusted. So when you're further back, it could be created, you know, it could be louder.
Okay. So do we need a motion to look further into this?
I mean,
Yes.
Hiram?
Yeah,
Right.
but we need some type of, why is my mic not working again? Okay, well, I can't hear myself, so there's one of those examples. We need something for some type of direction. My recommendation is that we take a few of his examples there. Maybe at the next meeting, fit 2 people, one with one mic, one with the other type of mic. I'll volunteer if you want me to.
Yeah.
And we can see how they work with the playback on YouTube, how they work for the audience here, and how they work for us in general comfort and feeling. We can pass them around if y'all want to, and someone could set up it periodically through the night, something like that. So we give a trial run before we just all in purchase something. These mics aren't a problem. Mr. Serrato keeps his in his hand. If we're willing to do that too, that's another option. But I know that's not comfortable, it's not fun, but there's multiple ways we can go with this. But I think a trial run with a few examples would probably be the best bet moving forward before y'all make a committed decision.
Do we need a motion for that?
We need a motion to move
So let's do
forward with
that in
something.
January.
I'll make a motion that we adopt a trial period with 2 examples, and then we'd add volunteers up here to use them, and that would be happening in our first meeting in January.
Is there
Second, okay.
any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, well, back on our draft agenda. Next up is Robert Neal, who many of you know, has been with us many times, our dredging consultant from Moffett Nickel. He's going to give us an update on where things stand now, and then has agreed to answer some questions for us. Robert, thank you for being here again, and it's all yours.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. And unfortunately, I don't have all good news, but what I wanted, appreciate the opportunity to give an update on the dredging project, where we are, and where we could go from here. There's about 11 slides, so I guess we'll hold questions until the end. Incorporate all questions. I'll go through the presentation, and then we'll read through the 11 questions that were provided, and then open it up for formal discussion if that works.
Yes.
So with that, jump right in. Maybe. Maybe not. Okay, so very quickly, just three main items I want to talk about. First is the update on Marys and Turtles Creeks permit, the permit for maintenance dredging of that. Then jump into the permit for South Jingus Creek, the Bay Area and feeder channel. And also the DEQ, the grant, status of the grant. And just to cover the grant, because there's not really a slide on that, we have had discussions on that, and the grant will be reauthorized in the first week of January. So that is behind us. We have, it's just a matter of the appropriate staff being in the office in Raleigh to actually key it in and get it rolling. So the grant that was expired, that we did not renew back in July or such, is now, as of the first week in January, will be back online, I guess, for lack of a better word. And then if this works, next slide. There we go. So jumping into Marys and Turtles Creek, just a refresher of what we're talking about 16,000 yards coming out of the two creeks right by the boat ramp. These are primary nursery areas and have been dredged before back in 2002. This permit was issued last week, so that was issued on approximately December 11th. It allows 3 years for the dredging of that work, so we could begin construction of that as soon as the council wanted to. It would take about 30 days to prepare plans and specs, and then begin advertising, and then 30 days from there we could rush. We could get a contractor on site the first week of beginning of February. We expect about 2 months of dredging, so that would be February and March. Construction needs to complete by permit by March 31st, so we would be rushing the deadline at this point, but it is feasible. We believe we could accomplish that. One thing the permit requires that we did not, that was not originally expected in the beginning, was a oyster relocation plan. If you remember, when we did the shellfish survey in both Jinks Creek and Mary's Turtle, we did not find any oyster in the footprint. There was only clams. There were 5 clams in Mary's footprint and nothing in Turtle's in the dredging footprint itself. However, the agencies have stipulated that we prepare and administer a relocation at the town, and prepare and administer a oyster relocation plan. What that means is my understanding, is literally walk and rake the dredge footprint anywhere we expect to be dredging, and trying to rake up and remove any oyster that we find there during the permitting, prior to construction. Also, we will need to map the marsh crash that was anticipated, but so the only outstanding item there is that oyster relocation plan, even though it is a requirement of the permit. And then there have till again 2021 to construct. If we begin this season, and talking with town staff a little bit, there could be a problem with the assessment. I'm not completely, it's kind of out of my wheelhouse, so I may need some on the financial aspects of the assessment, because there's so few properties in Turtles and Mary's Creek. If the other properties, if Jinks Creek, Feeder Canal, Bay Area, if that project does not go to construction, or the permit's not issued, then the assessment would be strictly allocated to the properties in Turtles and Mary's Creek. And the cost could be higher than the original estimate, because it's we're spreading it a fewer pool of properties, of beneficiaries to the project. So that is one thing we will need to discuss. So I do have a cost estimate, updated estimate based on everything we have to this date in additional slides. But when we look at possible reasons to wait until the other project is ready to go, would be, I'm involved with the state through NC Byway, as well as working with Sunset Beaches, trying to find ways to reduce the cost of the project. We are having some headway in working with the Corps of Engineers as far as being able to use the disposal sites, the core disposal islands. So there is a potential, no guarantee obviously, but a potential that we can be able to gain access to those islands by next year. Bring in a hydraulic dredge instead of the excavator that is currently planned, and no need to truck the materials. What we would eliminate the need to truck the material, eliminate a huge mess there, and reduce those costs as far as the construction cost. Also, the aspect of being able to spread the project of the many beneficiaries, so that the cost for each individual property goes down, as opposed to allocating it to just a few. So those are the benefits if we decided to hold off. Obviously, that we have been pushing very hard to go to construction this season. We do have the permits in hand for Turtles and Mary's Creek, so that is the option before us at this point. And that we can discuss further as we move along, but wanted the council to be aware of where we are there. And then, so going through the cost estimate, this is just an update with the cost for the relocation, the oyster relocation. As we look at that again, it's the lump sum for what we expect a clamshell dredge or excavator and barge, $75,000. And then because it's a smaller project, the bonds and insurance have gone down. The dredge and fill, we still expect to be around that $47, $48 a yard, and that includes the trucking and tipping fee for the disposal site identified currently. We have the contingency, and then in construction administration, the basically $140,000. That includes those options to identify the marsh grass limits. We have to maintain a 20-foot buffer from the marsh grass, so regardless of where our footprint says we can dredge, as those grasses encroach in that footprint, we still must stay 20 feet away. So our dredge footprint, as the grass expands, our dredging footprint reduces. We have to maintain 20 feet away from any established grasses so that we do not impact those. And then, so that is doing Turtles and Mary's Creek, we anticipate a cost of approximately $1.1 million. Continue this mic. So breaking that down into our local share, state share, we see, approximately $360,000, $370,000 for a local share for that, and then the properties that would be split just among the properties in Mary's and Turtles Creek if we do not wait for the other project. And I'm not sort of out of my wheelhouse as how that would be split. I know we've talked about shoreline length and properties, and I'll leave that to the council, but I'll provide the total estimated cost at this point. Obviously, when bids come in, we can hope for lower and do everything we do to try and reduce those costs, but my best guess at this point, my estimated guess at this point is we're looking at $370,000 for a local cost for Turtles and Mary's Creek. So moving from there to the South Jinks Creek project, the Bay Area feeder channel, just as a site plan of what we're looking at, the approximately 33,000 cubic yards we expect to come out of the feeder channel and finger canals. That material is completely incompatible, so that will be trucked upland. The Bay Area as well, approximately 16,000 cubic yards coming out of there. The current alignment, that is uncompatible material, cannot be placed on the beach, so that material will need to be trucked upland. And then roughly 40,000 cubic yards, 40,000 coming out of South Jinks Creek, which we hope to be able to place on the beach as beneficial reuse between 5th and 12th Street. And it did work that time. So as far as the status of that permit, we originally submitted back in November 1st. So originally submitted back in November, actually it was the second submittal, and first official submittal back in November 1st. It was returned due to formatting issues, I'll say, and from staff input at DCM, they believe that the reformatting of the permit would help during the variance request. We'll leave that to their judgment, and we went with their recommendations. We resubmitted roughly 1st of December, and as of December 14th, got a phone call from Doug Huggett notifying us that we did not take enough samples in South Jinks Creek, enough sediment samples to classify the material as beneficial reuse or beach compatible. The Rule 15, the North Carolina Administrative Code referenced in the PowerPoint here, designates that a minimum of 5 evenly spaced samples must be collected, must be used to classify the material. Moving forward, if this, no, I got it, it's gonna work. It just worked. So this is when we initially started the project. We, coming out of we had the first agency coordination meeting, and there was no concerns mentioned by the agencies as far as shellfish in Jinks Creek. So we anticipated all of Jinks Creek being dredged, and we evenly spaced our cores. We had 13 within Jinks Creek, spaced out relatively 500 feet apiece. When we took North Jinks Creek out of the project, the sampling had already been conducted. That left 3 sites. It left 3 samples. 3 samples within the beneficial reuse area. These at the 11 at the bottom noted VC 11, 12, and 13 in that bottom little L-shaped curve. We still anticipated, because there are other sites used to classify the borrow area. There were still 26 total. There's probably took out 13, so over half of the core samples still available for use. However, DCM says their interpretation is those other sites were used to classify non-compatible material. By rule, we have to use 5 samples to classify compatible material, and we've only used 3. They openly state they don't agree with the rule, but they are holding us to it. They don't agree that that rule should apply to a project this small. However, they stated the rule is the rule. That was a quote from Doug Huggett. So nothing they can do, their hands are tied, and applying that to us. So we have 3 samples, and we need a minimum of 5 in order to classify the beach compatible material. So with that, that is missed one. So if the council elected, there are options on what can be done as far as that. We can obviously challenge that rule. Do not recommend it, but we could challenge that and go forward to I guess, the CRC. However, I don't think that's going to be profitable or successful. The other option is we could take all the material upland, the 40,000 cubic yards, just put that, we could apply and try to take it upland. There are rules that state we cannot take beach compatible material out of the system. DCM could come back and say we would be taking beach compatible material out of the system, putting it in an upland landfill, and deny that. The other option is to fulfill the testing requirements to verify completely if it's beach compatible or not, and then move forward from there. That is an additional cost of roughly $30,000 in order to complete that work that we did not anticipate up until this point. The cost savings from moving trucking it completely upland to beach placement is roughly $400,000 for the local share, and it will reduce the construction time. The extra 40,000 cubic yards would probably take a complete season to dredge. So we're looking at not 2 seasons, but 3 to complete the work if that material is trucked upland. So obviously, my recommendation, although no one, we're not happy with the decision of what has happened here, but I feel like we are bound and I recommend completing the sampling, and that's collecting. We have a contractor in the area. The 30,000 cubic yards, we have a contractor actually been on Oak Island last week. Says he could be here as quickly as Thursday, but definitely be ready to provide that additional information to the agencies by the end of January, and kind of go from there. We am proposing to collect 6 samples. Let's just not even, they said we need 5, we have 3. Go ahead and just propose 6 and move on and completely cover the area, so to speak, so there we could remove any concerns of what we're sampling, we would know in great depth of what that material would look like. So the 30,000 includes 6 samples instead of the additional 2 required, but we would collect an additional 6. So with that, that is what's before us. I will read the questions at this point, or you want council questions?
Robert, I think having heard your presentation this morning, the council may have a couple of questions just about things that you've indicated in your presentation. So I would say let's start with those while your presentation is still fresh in our minds.
Fair enough.
Then I'd be glad to read the questions that members of the community have submitted and get your answer, and then we'll get council members, give council members a chance to ask any additional questions to finish us up.
Understood.
It's been suggested that maybe we try to walk through the presentation in order in asking our questions. So I would ask if any members of council have any questions about the information that Robert shared with us near the beginning of the presentation. John?
When the grant got reauthorized, or gets reauthorized, did the amount of the grant go up?
Yes.
Okay, so it's still basically a 2/3 state, 1/3 local cost, our cost,
Yes.
based on whatever the cost happens to be so far?
Yes. Yes.
Thanks.
Other questions? Rich?
Mr. Mayor, I'm just looking at Mary's and Turtle Creek. I don't know how many homes there are on Mary's and Turtle Creek. But when I look at this total cost of 1.1 million, that's the total, that includes the grant. But when you go on to the next page, the local share is $368,000. Now, that's a lot of money. My concern is looking out into the future. This is a mandated program. The property owners are going to be required to continue this dredging program. The shear expense presently is $736,000. In 3 or 5 years, or whatever the time period is when this dredging will be required, will we be able to get a grant to subsidize their expense? I'm looking at $1.1 million 4 years from now if we don't get a grant. How are these people going to pay for that?
Well, let me say one thing that pertains to something that Robert mentioned early on in his presentation. And just to sort of bring everyone up to date, Council had looked at some time in the past, had looked at a variety of options for paying and determined that it would not be fair to the property owners on Mary's Creek and Turtle Creek to separate out that project from all the others. So Council's anticipation has been all along that we would have one aggregate bill for dredging, and that aggregate bill, as Council has previously decided, would be paid for by the approximately 350 property owners on a to-be-dredged waterway. Council's welcome to update their thoughts, but our feeling has been that we could not impose such a huge fee on the families on Mary's and Turtles Creek. So we're still looking at it, unless some change is made, of one aggregate number, and that would be part of it. Now, what I heard you say today, Robert, was because of when things are getting done, if we do Mary's and Turtle Creek before the Bay Area, the feeder canal, the finger canals in South Jinx is permitted. Then we've sort of got this bill sitting out there, and it's not fair to charge or assess people on all the other waterways for that bill. Well, they're not having any work done yet. That's something I think council will need to address. I mean, that's the first time, to my knowledge or to my recollection, that we've heard it stated exactly like that. But in trying to come up with the fairest possible way of assessing, I think that's going to need some discussion. Now, maybe council members have something they would like to say about that today, and this is a chance.
Well, I think several times, I'm sorry, Jan. Yeah.
I have a question. I'm not clear about the grant at all. I know we missed out on the first one we applied for or something, and now we're going for a different kind of grant. I would like more explanation on that, please.
Yeah, it's not exactly the case of, I don't believe. Robert, you want to just summarize
Yes.
the grant and now the
Sure.
renewal?
So the grant is, there's a shallow draft navigation grant provided by the state based on some type of accrediting to that county, to Brunswick County. This project is eligible, 2/3 paid for by the state, 1/3 by the local share. That we applied for that grant in 2016, got it. It is, we let it expire. It is renewable by letter. However, I believe staff change over for some other reason. It, did not get renewed.
State staff changeover.
State, yes,
Not
the
town staff
there's
changeover.
the project manager at the state, retired, and it is there on their, system. It simply went unchecked. We had, throughout, even beyond the expiration date, we had a constant communication with the current project manager with the state over the grant, and we were discussing the project and moving forward, and for some reason or another, we looked down and oh, it's expired. She's could not just reissue it. Prior to the expiration date, it would simply take an email or letter, something saying we need to renew it under current guidelines. But because it had already expired, she could not retroactively renew it. So then we needed to go back through the process. There was some discussion then, she's new and wanted to make sure that she was advancing correctly. So there was some discussion over what would be eligible and what would not be eligible. And these are some of the same discussions we had the previous project manager as far as dredging underneath docks, private property, benefits to private property. We needed to confirm and make sure the state and all parties of the state, up the chain, legal counsel as well, were satisfied that we are not benefiting public properties with state money. And so that was a delay as far as just sitting down and providing the information to them. So once that has been straightened out, it has been straightened out, and now when staff gets back in the office and they will actually key in the numbers, 1st of January, the grant will be up and running. It is the same type of grant. It is, I believe it is the same grant number, but it is, I guess it can't be the same grant number, but at any rate, it is the same type of grant with a new budget and would essentially start forward from there. So all costs that we have incurred, any cost incurred by the town is covered by the grant.
What about the cost we've already incurred under the expired grant?
Well, because we were already over budget, there is no cost there. We had a lump sum cost for the work that we exceeded, so there is no cost there for the town. So all costs for the town is covered under the grant.
Excuse me, we, through July 7th of this year, the town has paid to your company over $400,000.
Correct.
And I'm unaware of any reimbursement from any
don't-
grant for that money. What happens to that money?
The town has been reimbursed for a large portion of that. I'm not, that is in between the town, and we're not involved in the reimbursement process. But any invoice, we would have to invoice you.
Done several draws.
There's been no invoice from us since the grant's expired.
Right.
There's been one invoice we've torn up, so all costs under contract.
I'm talking about the prior cost.
Right, we have done several draws last year and previously for this grant and this project periodically.
Do you have a number?
Not on top of me. I think the last draw was when Bonnie Bray was still here.
Thank you.
Gil, I have a question for you. Talking what the mayor was talking about, Marys and Turtles Creek. You know, I speak for myself, but I don't believe this council is going to put a burden of $368,000 on this number of homes in Turtle and Marys Creek. So can we make a motion that we all agree on that so we can put that part of it behind us, that it'll be all one grant, one dredging program, not two dredging programs, which would cause a tremendous amount of burdens on those people on Turtle and Marys Creek?
That's in line with what our thinking has been from the beginning. It was just a matter of convenience for the process to divide it into two permits to get that done.
Right.
But our intention has always been
Right.
to wrap them all up together so that whatever property on Turtles Creek is, fits in whatever property on the island is, whatever solution we work out to that.
Do we
Yeah,
need to
I-
make a motion on that?
I think we need, I think we
I
need
believe-
more discussion on this.
Well,
Yes.
hang on.
I have a-
I'm sorry, real quick. Staff was going to recommend at the end of the presentation that Marys and Turtles be held off until we find the fate of the other permit application. Because the way the assessment law does work, you'll have to hold your public hearing and decide how you will assess Marys and Turtles if you proceed with that project separately, which means we'll have no choice but to consider the homeowner, the property owners along both Marys and Turtles, with which the town is one of those, in that assessment, and we can't go back and retroactively put it back with the other project. So, I mean, just looking at the 10 total property owners between those two parcels, I mean, two projects is 10, right? That'd be $36,000 a property owner.
So
One
we
of the
have to wait-
property owners is the town, however, right, with the
So
park,
therefore
which
it'd be
has,
$36,000 to the town.
unless you do by linear feet.
Well, even then, we'd be one of the largest,
So we can.
the
decide-
longest property owners.
Can we act on the staff recommendation now?
If y'all so decide, but I mean, I know there's more discussion, but that's gonna be staff's recommendation, because if you proceed under state law, we have no choice but to assess them at this cost.
So there's no discussion. We cannot do that to the 10 homeowners. Why there's more discussion on that? It should be one project.
My question would be, once we start the work, if we start Marys and Turtle, we're gonna have to pay for that. Can we draw on that grant from the beginning so the town doesn't keep a lot of money out of pocket?
Yes. As far as the work is done after January 1st, yes.
But the point being made is, if we postpone Mary and Turtles Creek until we have the permit approval and whatever guidance it is that comes down from the state for the South Jinks Creek portion, then there's not gonna be any work until we have all the permitting in, and then we'll start the project. That way we know that one portion of the project, Turtle and Mary's Creek, is not gonna end up a year down the road being stuck with $36,000 a lot. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Yeah, so.
It's my understanding, yes.
As we continue to get all this information, and sometimes it's revised because this project has been so fluid, I think the council's gonna have to regroup and see what we have, where we're going, and how we're gonna react to it. My overall concern, and I'm projecting 3, 4, 5 years from now, I'm just talking about Marys and Turtles Creek, because we don't have anything really finalized regarding the other areas. And I agree, everybody should pay the same rate. I think that makes sense. My concern is that we may be backing into something that we really haven't fully understand yet. I'm just talking Marys and Turtle Creek. I'm not talking about South Jinks Creek, the canals, the feeder canal in the Bay Area. And those costs are going to be probably even more. But there's going to be a point where this is going to cost so much money to the property owners that I'm afraid that they won't be able to pay it. And there's going to be a need to assess this 4 or 5 or 6 years from now and say, this assessment fee has to be charged to every taxpayer in this town. And I believe that's what we're backing into. And we need to understand that, and we need to study this very carefully, because I don't think many people in this town, especially the ones on the mainland who do not have boats, are going to be very pleased 5 or 6 years from now to pay a dredging fee.
Well, I'd like to say,
Mr. Mayor,
real quick.
That's just a,
All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Jan, let me-
it's not, it's just a thing to think about, Mr. Mayor.
But Rich, scare tactics is not going to work. We're not going to charge the people of this town that does not have a home affected by dredging. We're not going
I'm
to do
not.
that. I'm just saying, Rich, we said 4 times already up here that we're simply going to push off Mary and Turtles Creek into one big project, so they're not going to have that concern, and they're going to have a maintenance program for these homeowners for the next 4 years, 5 years. It's going to be an equal payment for all the people that are affected with 350 homes. So they're not going to have $1 million liability in 5 years from now. I don't know why. It's so simple what we're trying to do here, and you're trying to derail it, and that's how I feel.
Mr. Mayor,
Jen?
excuse me. I would really like to see a comprehensive presentation from staff on the grant, on how this is going to work, and maybe answer some of the questions we've brought here today before we do anything else. I think we need more information than we can get in this meeting, whether that be at a workshop meeting or whatever. I would really like to see a more comprehensive presentation from our staff on what's been done, what we've received, what we've paid, what we expect to pay in the future, et cetera.
Okay. Now, I just want to emphasize that today is really information gathering. I don't know that we're going to be making any decisions today. We just want to keep learning as much as we can learn. And Janet, to me, that seems like a reasonable request. That we haven't done that since I've been here. I don't know if it was done before that, but understanding sort of the ins and outs of the grant, that seems like that would be very helpful. John?
The question at hand is to make a decision not to do Turtle to Mary Creek until we've got the rest of the permitting done. And that's the only thing. We're not spending any money on that, except approving $30,000 to do the extra sampling of the South Jinks Creek area, which we would have to do. We'd have to make some type of a decision on that anyway. So I mean, the question at hand now, not to prevent what Jan is asking for, is just to make a rational decision that we agree not to go forward with Turtle and Mary's Creek until we've got the permits for Jinks Creek. Simply.
Okay, let's do these two things next. First of all, Jan, do you want to put your idea in the form of a motion?
Yes, I would like to move that we have a comprehensive presentation from staff on this project.
And is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Mayor,
I'm sorry.
let me say that I'm not opposed to going ahead with a motion to do what John is requesting as well.
Yeah, I don't see those as being in
Yeah.
conflict at all.
I second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
And is there discussion about Jan's motion?
I don't understand what it's going to prove. If she wants to sit down with our staff by herself and ask these questions, she can do that. To have a special meeting for us to come back here and do the same thing, try to derail dredging, I'm not for it.
Mr. Mayor,
Jan?
I'm not trying to derail dredging. I'm trying to understand it, and I think the people of this town deserve to understand it as well.
I would like just to point out, there's 2.5 or 3 years of documentation of this whole process that's on the town website, and extensive briefings that Robert Neal has done, and the other information that has been put forward on this. You know, so I don't see that as a major necessity at this point, until we have some good clarity on what's gonna happen with South Jinks Creek.
Okay, Charlie, and then Rich.
I don't really see the need for it either. And I have to agree with Mark that it looks to me like what's trying to be done is to delay the project to the point where it will not be done at all. And that would be a sin.
Rich?
Mr. Mayor, gathering information in this very fluid project is a prudent thing to do. And you can't make intelligent decisions, both in the short term and in the long term, without information and facts. And this is something that we need to learn to do. We have been at this project for over 3 years, and most of our focus has been to dredge Jinks Creek. Many of these areas have been dredged before. And we have spent 90% of our time, 95% of our time with a previous council's request to dredge North Jinks Creek. Now South Jinks Creek is a concern. Mr. Mayor, we need as much information that we can get, whether it's from Mr. Neal, the staff, to fully understand and to insinuate in any way that this project that we're attempting to derail, we're not derailing anything. We need information, we need facts to understand this very complicated project.
Mr. Mayor.
Mayor, real quick.
Mr. Mayor,
Jan and then Mark?
my intention is not in any way to delay or derail anything with my motion. My motion is simply to help the community better understand, as well as all of us on council. That is all my motion is for. It is not to delay anything.
Well, by having another meeting on something we've went over multiple times, it's in the archives of this town. We have had 3 years of studying this program. So if that's not a delay, I don't know what it is. If you want questions answered, Jan, simply write them down, give them to the staff, and get your answers. And if you want to share them with the public, I have no problems with you sharing it with the public at a meeting. But for us to have another meeting, bring Robert back in, for us to assemble again over something we've discussed over and over again is a waste of time.
All right, if comments, if everyone's had a chance for discussion, I will call for a vote. All those in favor of Jan's motion, please say aye.
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 Those opposed?
No.
Nay.
The motion is defeated by 3 to 2. I would follow up, Jan, by saying that what Marcus just said would be of interest to me, and perhaps to others on council or in the community, of just meeting with staff informally. You know, I could learn more about the process, and I'd like to do that.
So are you charging me with meeting with staff and getting answers to the questions that I have and maybe some others have, and then getting it out to the public?
That sounds fine to me, and I'd like to be a part of that too.
Okay, that sounds great.
And I would like to be a part of it without violating the open meeting laws.
All right, we'll have to.
Ask me questions.
We'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Just for clarification, y'all are welcome to come in anytime and ask your questions individually. I mean, it's in your purview. So just let us know in advance so that we can get Tara ready with the financial parts of it, since, you know, like I said, our last draw was, I think, April last year, something like that. So it's, you know, I mean, just give us time to get Tara to get all the information from the past 3 years, since she hasn't had to deal with that yet, since she's new. And then after
Great.
the new year, we'll be more than happy to distribute that, no problem.
Great.
I have no problems with that, Mayor. None at all.
Okay. Robert, then the other question that I had, and I want to go back and just make sure I've got Mary's and Turtle Creek set in my mind. If we do not dredge Mary's and Turtle Creek in the next few months, will it be possible for us to dredge Mary's and Turtle, the feeder canal, the finger canals, the Bay Area and South Jinks Creek, all in 2019, in the 2019-20 dredging season?
If we have permits,
What's the chance of not getting this permit in January?
it'll come down to the variance request. It'll be
Say
the
that
variance,
again.
the South Jinks Creek feeder channel and Bay Area will be due to the variance request. If it is denied, then we will have to find a deep water connection. If the variance is accepted, then I don't see an issue with it. There is, obviously, there is a chance that South Jinks Creek, for some reason, we find a rule that does not allow that material to be beach compatible. There is a chance it could, if the council wants, if we obtain permits and the council is, wants to finish it in 1 year, 1 season, yes, it can be done. The variance request is the issue. There could be a cost factor with that as far as South Jinks Creek, the amount of material moving in 1 season could increase the cost as far as a mobilization fee to bring another piece of equipment down. But yes, it can be done in 1 season. That's not an issue if that's the way we want to proceed.
Robert, I got a question, something you touched on. Trucking the material is much costlier than pumping it into, so if we can pump it into these islands, what's changed that will allow us to do that? You last several times said we can't do that because the Army Corps of Engineers has said no to it.
Well, we said we wouldn't be able to negotiate with the Corps this year. We wouldn't be able to reach that goal this year. We are still working with the Corps and discussing with the Corps. At this point, the Corps has given us a couple of options. Still on the table is if we remove the material within a year or 1 year to 3 years, if the material we place, we then remove it, we can place it there. That doesn't reduce cost. The other option is if we move material prior to the project. That doesn't reduce cost. The third option is if the local sponsor owns the island. If say the town owns those islands, then the Corps cannot stop the owner from using the island as they see fit. They can stop the owner from making a profit from using the island, as far as they don't view that the same. Whereas these is a privately owned island, not by the local sponsor, then that privately owned individual was charging a tipping fee. If that tipping fee was not charged, if they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart to help the community to benefit, if they benefited from the dredging project and felt that they could offer that, then the Corps, it would be their island, their use. They couldn't object to it. We have Wilmington District's agreement on that. We don't have Washington D.C.'s agreement on that. We're running that up the chain. We're continuing that conversation. So when we said we couldn't, the Corps wouldn't let us use it, we couldn't reach that agreement, didn't feel we would have D.C.'s consent on that process this year. We are still working towards that, both on a statewide effort and local. So I'm not going to guarantee that we can have that by next year. I think it's...
One quick, but what would be the cost savings if we could do it the other way?
There was over $1 million. It would be, I've got to go back and look at numbers, but you're looking at basically 100,000 cubic yards times $48 a yard versus $9 a yard plus 350,000. So there's a lot of numbers there. I'd have to go back and look. At least
a large sum of
at least $1 million,
large
at least $1 million. Yeah.
John?
I need some clarification here, because there were a lot of its and there and places like that. And the first thing I go is that in your presentation on Turtle and Mary's Creek, you did not clearly say what the plan is now for the spoils, if we were to say dredge it now.
Yes.
And what I'm hearing you now is that if we postpone to next year, there's an option that we can use one of the spoils islands along the intercoastal. Is that what you've been talking about right now?
There's a possibility.
A possibility. And a combination depends on who owns the island and what kind of tipping fees get costs.
It depends on Washington D.C.'s, the Corps of Engineers' guidance on their policy. So that is the first thing. We have to first get Washington D.C.'s, get headquarters, Corps of Engineers headquarters consent that the guidance issued in February 2017 stating that we cannot, that a non-federal use of those islands is prohibited, that guidance does not apply to the owner of the islands. They have not given that consent. So it is some muddy water.
Okay, so the spoils issue, disposal of spoils for any location right now, other than possibly putting compatible spoils on the beach, has not yet been resolved.
No, we have an upland site. We have
Where is the upland site?
It is Ike Williamson Spit. I don't 179 off 179.
Georgetown Road.
Georgetown Road. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, but that's, the issue we had before was being able to take the spoils out of the water, having it drained sufficiently so it could be trucked to the upland site, you know, that stage in between. Has that been resolved?
We are trucking it wet. We are going to seal the trucks, and we're going to try and seal the trucks and truck it wet.
And that can be done technologically?
It technologically can be done. I mean, there's still strong chance there'll be leakage, but
Will
it's the
the
best
cleanup
option we
crew
have.
following
Yeah.
the trucks?
It's the best option we have
Okay.
at this point.
I have
So-
a follow-up question.
Oh, I'm
Okay.
almost finished with that line of question. So there's still, if Corps of Engineers, Washington, says that February 2017 rule on using the disposal islands along the intercoastal waterway does not apply to private owners, then we have a combination of dealing with whoever the private owner is to get their approval to do the spoils, or trying to acquire the land ourselves.
The current thought is it has to be the local sponsor. So the town or the state would have to own the land, to own the
Can I
island.
just follow up on that, Jen, real quick? Just, if we purchased that property, would the grant cover that?
I don't know.
Hiram is saying no.
I don't think it would. I mean, the grant is for navigational channels and dredging. It's not for property acquisition.
But if,
That would have to be a term in the grant to be qualified.
but if we purchased the property, wouldn't that change the math in terms of tipping fees
Yes.
and things like that?
Would it offset the cost?
A calculation that be put in at some point?
It would change the cost to an extent. It may still equal out even for the total cost for the town, give or take. I don't know exactly the details
Yeah,
of
we
how
have to
much
do the
money
math.
it would cost to do the hydraulic dredge to those islands. Where it would actually benefit the town more so would be in the maintenance dredging in the future. We'd actually have a specific site that we'd have no problem taking it to, and it would reduce the cost of maintenance dredging in the future. But that's all up in the air of, property acquisition is not the easiest thing to accomplish either. So it's, it'd be nice to have something like that for the future. I don't know where that would actually save the money. It might break even in my opinion, looking at Robert's numbers.
So at this
Right.
point, it's waiting for the Corps of Engineers in Washington to figure out what is permissible for us.
Yes.
My question is, I remember not the last presentation, but the one before that, that you had got tentative approval to use the Army Corps of Engineers Island. That is correct.
No. We've gotten, when we started this project, yes, we got tentative approval to use the island. Then that was it was January of 2017, January 30th of 2017, we received tentative approval to use the island. February 2nd of 2017, headquarters, Washington DC, issued a letter to all districts saying no non-federal use of those islands, and we didn't find out about that until sometime in 2018. But, so yes, we had to cheat. At this point, we do not have authorization to use the islands.
Are you planning to attempt to use the island?
We're going to continue to investigate any opportunity available to reduce project cost.
Okay, if you use anything other than the Army Corps of Engineers Spoil Island, which they have strict requirements for what you do with the spoil, when you put it on the Army Corps of Engineers Island, will you not have to do those same kind of requirements if you put it on private land or whatever land? Will you not have to install the same protective measures to protect our area waters, and is that not costly?
Generally, well, I mean, there's a cost to everything, so it's a definition there, but it's I would say not extremely costly. We would put an earthen berm around the fill site so that the return waters, if any, from a hydraulic dredge, do not leak back into the adjacent waters. If it's a clamshell dredge excavator by bucket, you simply put up a silt fence around a 3-foot-high silt fence so that any waters running through that fence the sediment would be captured by that fence.
Is that the same requirements the Army Corps of Engineers has for their spoil islands?
Yes, we would have a weir system. In the spoil island, you have a weir system set up so that the water ponds, the fines settle out, the water overtops the weir so that theoretically clean water runs out. We would have to monitor turbidity so that we would know when to raise that weir level. But yes, we cannot discharge turbid water into state waters or any adjacent waters. So yeah, it's the same requirement. We have to control that return waters. We have to control and manage the return waters in some fashion.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Let me just make one comment, Rich. There was actually a good piece of news in what you said there, and I wanted us to capture that it appears we will not be using temporary dewatering sites.
Yes.
And that, I think, is something that council had really wanted to happen, and it sounds good that that will not happen.
No,
we really wanted it not to happen, and now it sounds like it won't. So that's great. A specific question: if council moves the dredging of Marys and Turtle Creek back to fall of 19, presumably, could the oyster relocation survey proceed now?
Would have to verify that. I do not expect it could. I expect it would need to wait until within a month of construction.
Okay.
I'd say a month. I'd say just immediately prior to construction. I have not verified that.
So Lisa, do we have to make a motion now to accept 6 more samples in the South Jinks Creek at that cost?
What y'all need to do is direct Robert to proceed with the requirements of DCM to finish submitting the application. And if part of that is the cost increase of 30,000 or whatever it was.
Yeah,
so it doesn't specifically say, I mean, you can be as specific as you want, but really we need a motion to proceed with the project. Otherwise it's,
All right. And
Up in
Rich,
the
you
air.
had a comment that I cut off.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You sort of hinted to me, at least this is what I interpreted it, that there may be concerns regarding South Jinks Creek. And my hope is that this project doesn't get further delayed. My concern is the following, and this pertains to South Jinks Creek. What is the probability that we will even get a permit for South Jinks Creek? You sort of hinted that it might be an issue. Now, is the probability that the state will issue a permit, however, that the town has to do an EIS, which will cost a couple of $1 million at least. I'm not an expert. And then the question that I have, it's not to you, Bob, it's to this council. Knowing this major potential concern that could delay this project even further regarding South Jinks Creek, why is it necessary? And I ask the council because I don't know. I inherited this thing along with the rest of us. Why is it so necessary to dredge South Jinks Creek? This is a question to the council. I don't expect them to answer it, but this is something that we have to think about, Mr. Mayor, as we move forward. Thank you.
I'd like to answer that. I've had the opportunity of being in a boat with Dustin Graham, and in low tide, in front of certain houses, there's a foot of water. Feeder canal would not be able to get out, not the feeder canals, but the Bay Area would not be able to get out if you did not dredge South Jinks Creek in those
Can you
small
get
areas.
out? Can you get out at high tide?
Richard, yes, you can.
Thank you.
Council, Are there any other questions that you have that follow up specifically on Robert's presentation this morning?
I have,
Jim.
I have several more questions, but I would like to hold those until after you ask the questions from the public.
Okay. It seems like it might be that time. And for those of you who have followed this closely, some of the questions I'm going to ask I know have been asked before.
Should we make a motion, Mayor, to
Oh,
accept?
I'm sorry. I think that is a good idea.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to accept the DCM notification, the additional sediment samples required, 6 more samples required.
Second?
Thank you. We have a motion and second discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I was just saying that some of these questions have been asked before, but I still think they're okay questions because we're all sort of moving through this complicated process differently. But these are some questions that many people are would like Robert to respond to, and I've tried to group them. The first 3 have to do with the sand that will be presumably piped from South Jinks Creek to the beach. Will the sand that is piped to the island beach look exactly like the sand that is already there?
And I'm going to provide examples of what the sand will look like, and so yes, these are samples from the sediment analysis.
That's not marijuana.
Some days. So I'll pass this around, make sure I have it organized. All right. The bag with the yellow tag, that is the existing beach straight off the sand, existing sand straight off the beach. These samples correlate, if this works. We'll go back. Oh, to the, and these 3 samples are the samples that come from the South Jinks Creek area. There's 3 samples that we have. This, the 10th one is from North Jinks Creek, but so I'll hold on to that one. But I'll start there.
Okay.
And these, I'm well happy to leave these here if need be, but DC12 and DC13, these are the samples that the state had no concerns with. They did feel like this sample, DC11, may have too much shell in it.
Okay.
So that's.
All right. This is very helpful. Thank you. Hiram, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
As far as the appearance, you mentioned at a previous meeting, it'd probably take about a year for any new sand to bleach out.
Yeah, it's typically sand, when we see this, this is, if sand comes out darker, it could bleach out over a year. Sand generally underwater, it's not UV light or whatnot. It could take a year to bleach, but this sand is actually very similar in color from what we saw on the beach. But yes, there is some bleaching effect over the course of a summer.
May I point out, since I asked the question about the turtle nesting area, the reason I asked for information regarding the turtle nesting area on the beach where it is going to be nourished with this sand is because of that year that it takes. Darker sand, which this will be because it is wetter, affects the nesting of turtles. Turtles who nest in that darker sand, the darker sand raises the heat on the eggs in the nest, and that causes a change in sex of the turtles, and it produces more females. This happened at Oak Island, and they had to move all the turtle nests that were in the areas where they did the beach renourishing. That is why I requested this information. Thank you.
Robert, I think the second question is really answered by the bags that you've passed around. A couple of people mentioned that in their experience on other islands, dredge sand was very rocky and really changed the nature of the beach. And I have seen a case of that myself. But the bag number 11 that is coming around here that may or may not have too much shell, my immediate reaction is even that would be, I mean, that's very acceptable to me. You all may have expertise that I don't have.
Robert, can I ask a question? Can we override them and say that we think that's acceptable, or do we have to listen to them?
It'd be another variance request.
Oh,
There is one other sand-related question that came in, and it's this. The latest we have heard is that the sand piped into our beach will be placed between 5th and 12th Streets because that is where it is most needed. However, after recent storms, it looks to us like other areas on the beach are in greater need of sand. Must the sand be placed between 5th and 12th Streets, or can it be placed elsewhere? Who will decide this and when?
The sand can be placed about anywhere that the council wants to put it on Sunset Beach. Closer to the inlet, you run into problems as far as the can't place it close to the inlet. But generally speaking, you can put it anywhere on Sunset Beach that you want to. There is an additional cost.
Isn't it true that the Army Corps of Engineers requires several thousands of feet away from the inlet?
No, they put it, I mean, the Army Corps, for beneficial reuse, I mean, even on Ocean Isle, they put it right next to the inlet. It's come out of Shalot Inlet and put it right on the inlet shoulder. Carolina Beach, the same. They use the beneficial reuse material to nourish the inlet shoreline. Mason Inlet as well, that's not the Corps, but the Corps of Engineers as far as Ocean Isle Beach and Lockwood's Folly. For Holden Beach, and Carolina Beach, they nourish the inlet shoulder. Beneficial reuse is different from beach renourishment. This sand is not placed for shoreline stability. It's placed as a disposal site for the material you're dredging. It's least cost placement. So yes, there's a strong chance if you place it close to the inlet, it's going back in the inlet. But if you're paying the cost and willing to take that chance, then it's your money. But no, the Corps of Engineers generally, I mean, a lot of their projects, they place it right on the inlet shoulder. I would, for this project, stay away from it.
Didn't we have to do sand samples between 5th and 12th Street to make sure both sides match? So if we decided to move to a different location, we would have to go back and do the sampling process?
Yes, there is additional cost, but samples and surveys. Have to have five evenly spaced profiles, survey lines within the disposal, within the placement area, beach placement area, and 13 sand samples per survey line. So roughly 13 times 5, 65 or so.
And we've already done that for 5th through 12th Street.
Yes.
And Robert, one question I know was asked earlier, but sort of fits in here just as a reassurance. When that sand is being piped in, it will not block the beach. People will still be able to pass between the site where the sand is coming in and the water. Is that not correct?
Yes, yes. We will, I mean, there will be a corridor fenced off. I mean, there'll be a large section of the beach closed to public just because of construction activity. But that at all times there'll be a pathway for egress up and down the beach.
Okay, thank you. The next section of questions has to do with a topic that has been discussed in a couple of sections and with a couple of presentations as well. It's a short statement and then some follow-up questions. One of the key areas of difference among proponents and opponents of dredging South Jinks Creek is in the volume of water and the velocity of the water flow that would exist if South Jinks Creek is dredged. One of the people we heard from was Dr. Len Pietrafesa, and he indicated that based on observational data, they estimated 40% more volume and faster water flow than the computer model that was developed by Moffett and Nickel. Can you explain why I mean, there are two different ways of putting the data together, but can you explain why there would be such difference between the two models?
Well, there was only one model. That's one clarification. But we're confusing the answers of two questions. We were tasked, Moffett Nickel was tasked with one question. Answer the question, would velocities change if the bathymetry changed in along all of Jinks Creek? If the bathymetry changed, would the tidal velocities change? We did not include wind. We said that in the report. Calibration did not include wind. And the wind input is going to be the same if you dredge or if you don't. The wind input will be the same. It's a constant. Yes, the velocities will be higher, but that does not answer the question of will they change if the bathymetry is changed. And we strived for that question, a yes or no question. Will the tidal velocities change? It was not necessary to include wind. It was less expensive to include wind. We had a model already set up and proven for this area to use, so a cost savings there to not use wind. And we can go back and include wind, but the answer will remain the same. The answer to that question will remain the same. The other question is, what are the tidal velocities? We did not strive to answer that question to a degree that perhaps some may have wanted. We answered the question, would they change if the bathymetry changed? Would tidal velocities change if the bathymetry changed? That is the question we went for. And the model again is proven by the pier. I mean the causeway. It was used by the state to support that design, and so we're comfortable with it. We're comfortable with that. It's been proven, and we're stand behind it.
Okay. And the second question here, you just answered. And the third question has been partially answered, so let me modify it a little bit. A question that the key question that many people have is, would dredging South Jinks Creek increase or significantly increase the chance of either flooding or erosion in the Palm Cove area or on the eastern end of the island?
Not significant, no, it would not. No, we're not going to stop erosion, and we're not going to lower the risk of erosion. But the dredging would not create additional erosion, especially the cut that we have now would not. And we found, yes, we saw from the model if we dredge too big, too wide, that the velocities would change. But especially what we have designed now, no.
And maybe this would be a good opportunity. I don't know if I know there are so many numbers in this, but to talk about the amount of South Jinks Creek that would be dredged, or to summarize that.
There's let's see here. Can we go back to that, Cindy? I'm sorry. There's, I think, 1,400 to 1,500 feet of South Jinks Creek that's proposed to be dredged now. It's total 6,000 feet long, and we're 6,100 feet is the from one end of Jinks Creek to where we're stopping, and we're proposing about 1,500 feet near the south end. We're dredging approximately 100 feet wide plus side slopes to -6 is our deepest cut. The graphic that shows, is the back of page. There you go. So the red lines here, it's a small graph, but the red magenta lines, dashed lines at the bottom of the page show where the L curve around South Jinks Creek. That magenta line is the current dredge area. So we're not even close to half of the area that we're proposing to dredge at this point. It is the shoaled area. I mean, it's at South Jinks Creek, pretty much emerging at low tide, but the rest of that has been removed. So during our, and it was surprising to me, the contributions of the tributaries here, but those contributions did, if we dredge too wide, did have some influence. Actually, if we dredge at all, they did have some influence, not significant and not one that we're concerned about. But if we did open Jinks Creek all the way, 100 feet wide, 7 feet deep, we saw some significant changes that warranted concern. But our last, I think we were looking at 40 feet wide or so, 5 or 6 feet deep. There was we didn't have any concerns as far as dredging that, as far as scour or additional flooding. But the current plan is 100 feet wide, 6 feet deep maximum for roughly 1,500 feet.
If you go back 2 slides, you get a much clearer picture.
All right.
There you go.
Okay, yes. Thank you.
And then to build on that question, what about a situation after a tidal storm surge? Would the additional water in the channel, or in the creek, present a significantly greater danger?
No, we didn't find that. We're actually, and I believe because we're dredging away from the docks, we're actually moving the flow area away from the mainland or the areas of concern for erosion. We did, during the modeling, we looked at Hurricane Hugo and the effect that would have and saw negligible change. And that was with the entire Jinks Creek open. As for this area, I mean, no.
And then certainly a broad question, but one that probably all barrier islands are going to be facing. How will rising sea levels impact this, or let's leave it at that.
This project's not lasting long enough to be influenced by sea level rise. I mean, it will, it filled in the one time. We expect, I think over a period of 100 years, at least 50 to 75 years, you could maybe need to address sea level rise. For this project, the last maintenance event for the feeder channel was 2002 or 2010. So at most, we're looking at 20 years.
And then the final question in this section, if there would be greater erosion or flooding than anticipated, is there a fail-safe plan?
Well, that's the beauty of this project, is we just walk away from it and let it fill back in. The material would show back in, and then as far as replacing the material or putting the material back, no, I don't think that would work. But if it doesn't perform the way we wanted it to, then we just walk away and let it fill back in.
Okay. And this is actually a South Jinks Creek question as well. Are there any other benefits from dredging South Jinks Creek in addition to increased navigational ability?
I mean, that some would say yes and some would say no. So that's the benefit is to who the party it affects. So I'll leave that to the users. If they could see a benefit of having that sand removed versus not, then that would be.
So it would be recreational kinds of things we're presuming that might be.
I mean,
enabled.
We've seen some cases where flushing was a benefit. Where I don't know that. Like I said, I don't think this is going to increase flushing. So, but yes, I think the main benefit would be recreational.
Plus the renourishment of sand on 5th and 12th Street. That's
True,
beneficial.
beneficial reuse, yes.
Well,
Go
I've
ahead,
got a
John.
related question to that. If we don't have the flushing, if the sandbar fills up and clogs up and it stops the flushing, does that have a negative impact on our marsh areas and P&As?
Well, sure, if it were to close, yes. I mean, and that's, yeah.
So there could be some benefit to make sure that the channels stay open so you have good, regular flushing.
Absolutely. I mean, we've done projects, environmental restoration projects that to target just that, to increase the flushing.
Thank you.
The next question is about the amount of dredging. And it reads, I have heard it said that the width and depth of the channels being dredged is designed to accommodate a 30-foot boat. That is a much larger boat than Sunset Beach was designed for, or we ever said we wanted. If we reduce that to a 23 or 25-foot maximum size boat, wouldn't we be able to do much less dredging and even save some money?
The design is really to the council. I mean, we could build whatever. There's no restrictions there. The reference to the boat, that is what I observed out there one day, and we picked a number, and said, here you go. So it can be changed to whatever. There is, you know, the cost savings is obviously, you can spend that any way you want to, as far as, do you save the initial construction, or yes, it would reduce the cost of initial construction. Overall cost. The benefit of construction is another way to look at it, whereas you're paying to bring the dredge in, you want them to do the biggest bang for the buck, do as much work as they can from an engineer standpoint. So there is, you know, you're removing less material. For the cost per cubic yard on a project-wide basis increases if you lower the volume. Overall total construction cost is lower, but the cost per cubic yard goes up. The maintenance, you know, built into this, and we don't know how this project will perform. We don't know if this will show back in a year or 20 years. We could, you know, and thought about proposing a monitoring plan to define what that shoaling rate is, so we can better understand how long we can expect this project to last. When we picked the design, that's really what we did. We picked a design based off other similar channels, not anything specific to Sunset Beach, because we didn't have the data. The time period, so if that answers your question, yes, you could save overall construction cost, and we can design it for, I mean, we can build whatever you want.
Robert, I just want to make a point. You know, as a young kid on this island in the mid-70s, there were shrimp boats that went down North Jinks Creek. So the notion that we've always been a small boat community is not true. It's filled in over the years, and now and Tubbs Inlet's filled in. But at times, there were bigger boats, probably at high tide. But at high tide now, a big shrimp boat can't get through there because of the shoaling. But at times, there was boats of larger sizes that used that Jinks Creek. So I want to put that on the record.
And Robert,
For the,
Anecdotal.
you know, I mean, if you go through the island
anecdotal.
itself, there are very few boats, if any, that are 30-foot boats that are back there on the island. You know, 23, 25-foot boat is a large boat for the canals in the island in the area. Just make,
what I hear is sort of the bottom line trade-off is we could dredge more narrowly, but with the consequence that we might have to dredge more frequently.
Right, and I don't want to, I mean, we don't know what the this may be too small, this may be too big. We literally just said, there you go, you know, let's try that based off of other channels, similar channels, and that has been reduced considerably to what we started with. So, yeah, I don't want to say, you know, if you don't do this, you're going to be in trouble, because we don't know.
Robert, can I ask you a question? At one time, South Jinks Creek was almost 100 feet across. Now it's 40 feet across. Did you determine that, or did the state?
No, the South Jinks, the current, it's 100 feet still. The South Jinks Creek hasn't changed.
Hasn't changed.
No, it's still 100 feet across.
I think I'm reading through, the 8th question is long with several parts, but I believe they were all answered already. in some of the questions that Jan had. You can see if there's anything else there. I'll just go on. It seems like there have been many delays in this process, including the recent delay regarding incomplete information being submitted with a permit application. Can you explain why these kinds of permit issues have occurred?
I would encourage, in that one, I have my thoughts, obviously, but I would encourage that we invite DCM staff down and let them explain it, because I have no idea. We submitted 2 identical permits, Mary's and Turtles Creek, and then South Drinks feeder channel in Bay Area. They were the same, we just changed the name because that was our intent in order to, we didn't increase the cost because it was the same permit. One is issued, one is not.
Are we our own worst enemy?
I would encourage you to invite DCM staff down to answer that.
Probably an answer in there someplace.
Certainly.
Then I guess what would be my final question from the questions that were submitted, when will a contractor be selected to perform the dredging operations?
And that once we would have to publicly advertise the bids, and that's, we are constantly talking with contractors all over the nation, but mostly those, because of the type of equipment, mostly those within North Carolina. But once the permits are issued, or we decide what the permits for the project that we decide we'll construct, those permits are in hand, then we can publicly advertise those bids. We give them some period of time to review, and then we open those bids and select off qualifications and mainly the lowest bid price. But that, if that answers the question.
It does, thank you. Council, those are the questions that were submitted. Now, do you have some additional questions that you would like to ask?
I do.
Jan.
I have some historical questions about Tubbs Inlet. I have placed in the rack over there a science data sheet of factual information about the things that have occurred at Tubbs Inlet over the years, and it describes its history back to 150 years ago. It also has aerial photographs that shows where dredging has occurred when the inlet was moved in 1970 and when the canals were developed in 1970. I think all of you will find that interesting. The reason I'm providing that is because there have been a number of emails with anecdotal situations about how Tubbs Inlet occurred, but this actually describes what happened at Tubbs Inlet. The second thing I have is that, are you aware that in 2002, West End property owners at Ocean Isle Beach submitted a permit application to dredge Old Sound Creek, which is very similar to Jinks Creek, that was commented on by the town of Sunset Beach, and also some comments that were made by DCM. I have copies of that for you, because I'm going to read some of those questions. So the first one, Lisa, for you. The first one is a letter from Sunset Beach commenting on that project during the public comment period. And I want to read three objections that Sunset Beach had to that permit. It was sent to the North Carolina State Clearinghouse, who undertook the comments at that time. And this letter is signed by Linda Flugel, who was the town administrator. The date is September the 3rd, 2002. And it says, the, quote, final version, quote, of the Tubbs Inlet Monitoring and Mitigation Plan as submitted by Kenneth A. Shanklin, Esquire, attorney at law, representing Tubbs Inlet Preservation and Management Group, Incorporated, does not address the action to be taken in the event the inlet migrates toward the town of Sunset Beach. A full EIS has not been submitted for the project. At this point, no one knows the impact this project will have on the town of Sunset Beach and its property owners. The town of Sunset Beach is concerned the mitigation and monitoring plan for the above described project does not address the possible property loss of the east end of Sunset Beach if this project is allowed to go forward. In the comments from Doug Huggett for the Division of Coastal Management, they listed some attachments, some conditions that they wanted to be put into this permit application. Those conditions were, and this is what Linda Flugel is referring to in her letter, number one was long-term maintenance dredging should be addressed and responsible agency for such maintenance should be identified. 2, consideration of Tubbs Inlet and Jinks Creek maintenance dredging should be addressed and responsible agency for such should be identified. Spoil areas for unsuitable materials should be provided for before approval of application approval. My question is, will not these same conditions be put on any application we submit for South Jinks Creek? Because it is very close to Jinks Creek in proximity.
Very well could. The permit being issued is a one-time event, so there's no long-term maintenance requirement. I do not anticipate the responsible agency could be identified as far as who would be responsible for the maintenance dredging, but there is no requirement to maintenance dredge.
But if the inlet needs maintenance, if
Well, no,
Tubbs
we-
Inlet needs maintenance, that's the concern.
Oh, as far as Jinks Creek requiring the town to dredge Tubbs Inlet, I don't see that at all, no.
Plus, at this time, when Jan's mentioned the 1970-something, that
This
was...
is 2002.
2002, that was a navigational, Tubbs Inlet was navigational. It is no longer navigational, so the flow of water is a lot less than it was, 15 years ago, 16 years ago.
I mean, nothing would surprise me at this point, but I don't see any connection between the maintenance of Tubbs Inlet and the South Jinks Creek project.
Thank you.
Other questions?
No, just a statement, Mr. Mayor. I think there's a lot of anxiety regarding South Jinks Creek. There's no question about that. Scientists have informed us, all of us here in this room, don't mess with the plumbing. So this is creating high anxiety, I believe, with Cammer, because they're not sure whether or not they're going to give us a permit. So I think we just need to really understand what we're doing before we make any decisions. And if the purpose of dredging South Jinks Creek is because of low tide, I have to remind everybody, boaters go out on high tide from Maine to Florida. Thank you.
Robert, this has been a long session, and we appreciate your being here, your answering our questions. I mean, we obviously are still trying to understand this as best we can, and we appreciate your responses, or your presentation and the responses to our questions.
No, I appreciate that, and I will say, I mean, if it's, as far as the grant or even the permitting, I believe the state project manager would be more than willing to come down and speak on the grant, do a presentation on what it, on how that is administered, and I believe also, DCM staff, we could, at least the new Beach and Inlet Shoreline Coordinator, may be willing to also come down and speak more about the topic, if council so desires, would be willing to take on, to present that request. And also, as far as the grant, I wanted the council to be aware of there's a quarterly meeting on the dredging projects in North Carolina that are under the grant agreement in New Bern tomorrow. We will be, that conversation, that meeting is also addressing the disposal islands. We're with the Corps. I'm presenting on it on behalf of North Carolina Beach and Inlet Waterway Association. So it's wanted to make the council aware of that in case they wanted additional information. The project manager, Cola Cordero, will be there, as far as many other agency personnel. But as far as additional information, I want to make sure you're aware of that meeting. And so I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And you know,
Robert, is
thank
that
you very
open
much.
to the public?
Yes, in New Bern. I can send you the invite.
Just as an aside, the issues that we've talked about regarding the Army Corps of Engineer regulations is something that communities all up and down the coast are dealing with right now. 2 recent meetings I've been to, that's been one of the main areas of topics, and everyone's just trying to figure out what is now acceptable that wasn't acceptable a short time ago. And I know there have been some other changes in regulations that have occurred, which has made all of our work a little more complicated. Thank you, Robert.
Would you like me to take those sand or leave them here? Leave the bags?
You can have,
The sandbag?
oh, the sand.
I'm going to propose that we take a 5-minute break, and maybe if anybody in the audience would like to look at the sand samples, we can then send them on with Robert, but I think they're pretty informative. So if you'd like to look at them, this would be a chance to do so. So let's take a 5-minute